Sarah Jenkins stood frozen at her front door, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Through the frosted glass, she could see them. Hundreds of them. Maybe 1,000 motorcycles lined up and down her quiet street in Detroit. The rumble of their engines shook the windows of her small house. Leather-jacketed riders stood shoulder to shoulder on her lawn, on the sidewalk, blocking the entire road as far as she could see. Some had chains hanging from their belts. Many had thick beards and sunglasses even though the morning sun was barely up. Her hands trembled as she gripped the doorknob. Just last night, she had helped 25 bikers who were stranded in the freezing cold. She had given them warmth, food, and a place to rest. She had opened her home to strangers because it was the right thing to do. But now, standing here with what looked like an army of bikers surrounding her house, Sarah wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. What did they want? Why were there so many of them? And why did some of them look so angry? Her 7-year-old son Marcus tugged on her sleeve. "Mama, who are all those people?" His voice was small and scared. Sarah swallowed hard, trying to keep her own fear from showing on her face. "I don't know, baby. I don't know. Let me take you back to where this all started." 3 days before Sarah's world turned upside down. We share powerful stories that uncover hidden truths and challenge perspectives. Subscribe to stay updated, share to keep others safe, and comment where you're watching from. Sarah Jenkins was a 32-year-old single mother who worked 2 jobs to support her son Marcus. During the day, she cleaned offices in downtown Detroit. At night, she worked at a diner serving coffee and pie to truckers and late-night customers. She was always tired. Her back always hurt. Her hands were rough from scrubbing floors and washing dishes. But she never complained because everything she did was for Marcus. They lived in a small 2-bedroom house on the east side of Detroit. The paint was peeling on the outside, and the heater didn't work quite right, but it was theirs. Well, it would be theirs in about 20 more years when she finally paid off the mortgage. The neighborhood wasn't fancy. Most of her neighbors were working people just like her, trying to get by and take care of their families. Sarah had grown up poor. Her own mother had raised her and her 3 sisters alone after their father left when Sarah was just 5 years old. Her mother had taught her that no matter how little you have, you always share with those who have less. "Kindness doesn't cost money," her mother used to say. "It costs heart." Those words stuck with Sarah her whole life. Marcus was the light of Sarah's world. He was a bright, curious boy who loved reading and asking questions about everything. His father had left before he was born, but Sarah made sure Marcus never felt like anything was missing. She went to every school event, helped with every homework assignment, and tucked him in every single night with a story and a kiss on the forehead. Money was always tight. There were times Sarah skipped meals so Marcus could eat more. There were winters when she wore 3 sweaters inside the house to save on heating bills. But she never let Marcus see her worry. She always smiled and told him everything would be okay, even when she wasn't sure it would be. It was a Thursday evening in February when everything changed. Sarah had just gotten home from her day job at around 6 o'clock. She was exhausted and her feet ached, but she had to get Marcus dinner and then head to the diner for her night shift. The temperature outside had dropped to 15 degrees, and the weather report said it might go down to 0 overnight. She was making grilled cheese sandwiches for Marcus when she heard the sound. At first, it was distant, like thunder rolling in from far away, but it got louder and louder. The rumble of motorcycle engines filled the air. Sarah looked out her kitchen window and saw them coming down her street. One motorcycle, then another, then 5 more, then a whole group of them. They were big bikes, the kind you see in movies. The riders wore heavy leather jackets and boots. Some had bandanas tied around their heads. As Sarah watched, the motorcycles started slowing down. One by one, they pulled over to the side of the road right in front of her house and the houses nearby. The engines cut off, and suddenly the street was quiet again except for the wind whistling through the bare winter trees. Sarah counted them. 25 bikers stood on the street, stamping their feet and rubbing their hands together. Even from inside her warm kitchen, she could tell they were freezing. Their breath came out in white clouds. Some of them were shaking. One man who looked to be in his 60s kept blowing into his cupped hands. Marcus pressed his nose against the window. Mama, why are those people stopped outside? Sarah watched as the bikers huddled together, clearly trying to figure out what to do. She could see one of them, a tall man with a gray beard, pointing down the road and shaking his head. Another man was looking at his phone and then showing it to the others. They looked worried. One younger biker sat down on the curb and put his head in his hands. Sarah's first instinct was to look away, to mind her own business. These were rough-looking men on motorcycles. Who knew what kind of people they were? The smart thing would be to just stay inside where it was safe and warm. But then she saw the older man with the gray beard stumble a little. His face was red from the cold, and his lips looked almost blue. Sarah thought about her own father wherever he was. She thought about Marcus and how she would want someone to help him if he was ever cold and stranded. She thought about her mother's words. Kindness doesn't cost money. It costs heart. Before she could talk herself out of it, Sarah grabbed her coat and opened the front door. The cold hit her like a slap in the face. She walked down her front steps and across the small patch of brown grass that was her yard. The bikers all turned to look at her. 25 pairs of eyes focused on this small black woman in a worn-out coat approaching them. Some of them looked surprised. A few looked suspicious. But mostly they just looked cold and miserable. "Excuse me," Sarah called out, her voice not as strong as she wanted it to be. "Are you folks okay?" The tall man with the gray beard stepped forward. Up close, Sarah could see he had kind eyes, even though his face was hardened by years of sun and wind. "We're all right, ma'am. Sorry if we're bothering you. Our bikes broke down." "Well, not broke down exactly. The cold is making the engines act up. We're trying to figure out our next move." "Where are you headed?" Sarah asked. "We were riding to a memorial service for a friend in Grand Rapids." Another biker spoke up. This one was a woman with short red hair and a nose ring. "But this cold is worse than we expected. The bikes are struggling, and honestly, so are we." Sarah looked at all of them. She saw the cold in their faces. She saw the worry in their eyes. And she made a decision that would change everything. "Come inside," she said. The bikers stared at her. The gray-bearded man shook his head. "Ma'am, that's kind of you, but we couldn't. There's too many of us." "I have a house," Sarah said simply. "It's warm. I can make coffee and some food. You can warm up and figure out what to do next." "Ma'am," the woman with red hair said gently, "you don't know us. We could be dangerous people." Sarah looked her right in the eye. "Are you dangerous people?" "No, ma'am. We're just a motorcycle club. We ride together, we raise money for veterans, and we look out for each other." "But you got no reason to believe that." "My mama always said you can tell a person's character by looking in their eyes," Sarah said. "I'm looking, and I don't see anything to be afraid of. Now come on inside before you all freeze to death on my street." The bikers looked at each other, having a silent conversation. Finally, the gray-bearded man nodded. "Thank you, ma'am. We'll take you up on that, but just for a little while to warm up. And we'll be respectful of your home. My name is Sarah, and you're all welcome." One by one, the 25 bikers followed Sarah into her small house. It must have been quite a sight for the neighbors. Sarah Jenkins, the quiet single mother who kept to herself, leading an entire motorcycle gang into her home on a freezing February evening. Inside, the house was cramped with so many people. The bikers filled the living room, the dining room, and even stood in the kitchen. But they were polite. They took off their boots by the door without being asked. They spoke in quiet voices. When Marcus peeked around the corner from his bedroom, looking nervous, several of the bikers smiled and waved at him gently. "You folks hungry?" Sarah asked, even though she had no idea what she was going to feed 25 people. "Ma'am, Sarah, you've done enough," the gray-bearded man said. "I'm Robert, by the way. This is my club, the Iron Riders. We don't want to put you out any more than we already have." But Sarah was already opening her refrigerator and pantry, taking stock of what she had. There wasn't much. Some eggs, half a loaf of bread, a pack of hot dogs, some pasta, a jar of sauce, and the grilled cheese sandwiches she'd been making for Marcus. It wasn't enough for 25 people, but it was something. "Marcus, honey, come help Mama," Sarah called. Her son emerged slowly from the hallway, shy but curious. The bikers made space for him, and Sarah could see their faces soften when they looked at the little boy. For the next 2 hours, Sarah performed what could only be called a miracle. She cooked every bit of food in her kitchen. She made pasta with sauce. She fried the hot dogs and cut them up to add to the pasta. She made grilled cheese sandwiches on the griddle 4 at a time. She boiled all the eggs she had. She even found an old box of crackers in the back of the pantry and put out a jar of peanut butter with them. It wasn't fancy food. It wasn't even that much food. But she served it with a smile, and the bikers ate it like it was a feast. The woman with red hair, who introduced herself as Linda, helped Sarah in the kitchen. "You're something else, you know that?" Linda said as she stirred the pasta. "Most people would have called the cops on us." Sarah shrugged. "My mama taught me that everybody deserves kindness. Besides, you all seem like good people." "We are," Linda said. "But we don't look like it, I know. That's why what you're doing means so much." As the evening wore on, Sarah learned about the Iron Riders. They were a motorcycle club that had been together for 15 years. They did charity rides for veterans' hospitals. They volunteered at homeless shelters. They raised money for kids with cancer. Robert, the leader, was a retired schoolteacher. Linda was a nurse. There were mechanics, construction workers, an accountant, and even a librarian among them. They came from all walks of life, brought together by their love of writing and their desire to help others. They told Sarah about their friend Danny, whose funeral they were riding to. Danny had been a member of the Iron Riders for 10 years. He had died of cancer at just 45 years old, leaving behind a wife and 2 teenage daughters. The club was riding to Grand Rapids to honor him and to give his family an envelope with money they'd collected to help with expenses. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she listened to their stories. These weren't scary bikers. These were good people who looked different from her but had the same hearts she did. They cared about community. They helped others. They stuck together through hard times. Marcus, who had been nervous at first, was now sitting on the floor listening to Robert tell a story about the time Danny rescued a dog from a busy highway. The little boy's eyes were wide with wonder, and Robert was clearly enjoying having such an attentive audience. Around 9 o'clock, Robert checked his phone for the weather report. His face fell. "It's supposed to drop to -5 degrees tonight. The bikes aren't going to start in that kind of cold. We're going to have to call for a truck to come get us in the morning." "Where will you stay tonight?" Sarah asked. The bikers looked at each other. "There's a church about 3 miles from here," Linda said. "Maybe they'll let us sleep in the fellowship hall." "In this cold? You'll freeze walking there," Sarah said. Then, before she could think too hard about it, she added, "You can stay here." Robert stood up quickly. "Sarah, no. You've done too much already. We can't impose like that." "Where would you have me go?" Sarah asked. "To sleep knowing 25 people are out in the freezing cold because I didn't have the space? My mama would come back from heaven just to scold me." "Ma'am, there's too many of us," one of the younger bikers said. "We'd never fit." Sarah surveyed her small house. He was right. There wasn't nearly enough space. But she couldn't let them leave. "We'll make it work," she said firmly. "I have blankets and some pillows. You can sleep on the floors, the couch, wherever you can find a spot. It won't be comfortable, but it'll be warm." The bikers protested, but Sarah wouldn't hear it. She brought out every blanket she owned. She gave them the pillows from her bed and Marcus's bed. She turned up the heat as high as it would go, knowing her electric bill would be enormous but not caring. The bikers arranged themselves throughout the house. Some slept in the living room, others in the dining room. A few even slept in the kitchen. They were packed in like sardines, but they were warm. Before everyone settled down for the night, Robert pulled Sarah aside. There were tears in his eyes. "What you've done for us today, Sarah, I can't even put it into words. You didn't have to help us. You didn't know us. And you gave us everything you had." Sarah shook her head. "It's what anyone would do." "No," Robert said firmly. "It's not. It's what a special person does. Danny, our friend we're going to honor tomorrow, he was like you. He always helped people, no matter what. Seeing your kindness tonight, it reminds us why we're making this ride. To honor people who make the world better just by being in it. Sarah went to bed that night squeezed into her small bedroom with Marcus. She could hear the soft snores of the bikers throughout her house. She'd have to call in sick to the diner, losing a night's pay she couldn't afford to lose. Her food was gone. Her electric bill would be sky high. But as she held Marcus close and he whispered, "Mama, you're a superhero," Sarah felt richer than she'd ever felt in her life. The next morning, Sarah woke up at dawn. She quietly made her way to the kitchen, stepping carefully over sleeping bikers. She started making coffee, even though she only had enough for about 10 cups. She'd make multiple pots and everyone would share. As the smell of coffee filled the house, the bikers began to wake up. They folded the blankets neatly. They straightened the furniture they'd moved. Several of them started helping Sarah in the kitchen without being asked. Robert checked his phone and smiled. "The temperature's coming up. We should be able to get the bikes started in a couple of hours." The bikers shared the coffee, passing around the cups so everyone got at least a few sips. They were getting ready to leave, thanking Sarah over and over, when Robert's phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, and his face changed. He looked at Sarah, then back at his phone, then at the other bikers. When he hung up, he was smiling the biggest smile Sarah had ever seen. "What is it?" Linda asked. "That was Jake from the club. I called him last night to tell him where we were and what happened." Robert's voice was shaking with emotion. "He posted our story on the club's social media. Sarah, it's gone viral. Thousands of people have seen it. And Jake says," he paused, overcome. "He says the brothers and sisters are coming." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, confused. "It means," Linda said, her own eyes filling with tears, "that every biker who saw your story is riding here, to meet you, to thank you, and to make sure you're taken care of the way you took care of us." Sarah laughed nervously. "Oh, that's sweet, but really not necessary. How many people could it be?" Robert looked at his phone again, and the smile faded from his face. His expression became serious, almost worried. "Sarah," he said slowly, "Jake says there are motorcycle clubs from all over Michigan heading this way, from Ohio, from Indiana. He's getting calls from riders in Illinois and Wisconsin. He says," Robert swallowed hard, "he says it could be over 1,000 riders." The room went silent. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. 1,000? That's impossible. Why would 1,000 people come here? "Because what you did matters," Linda said softly. "In a world where people are scared of each other, where everyone minds their own business and locks their doors, you opened yours. You saw people who needed help, and you didn't see danger. You saw humans. That's rare, Sarah. That's precious. And riders, we take care of our own. But we also honor people who embody what we believe in. You're one of us now, whether you ride or not." Sarah's mind was reeling. 1,000 bikers? Coming to her house? Her small house in her quiet neighborhood? This couldn't be real. But it was real. Over the next hour, Robert's phone didn't stop ringing. The number kept growing. 1,500 bikers now. Maybe more. They were coming from everywhere, dropping what they were doing, getting on their bikes and riding to Detroit, to Sarah's street, to meet the woman who showed kindness to strangers. Sarah started to panic. "Robert, I don't have food for 1,500 people. I don't have space. My neighbors are going to freak out. This is too much. This is too big." Robert took her hands in his. "Sarah, just trust us. Everything is going to be okay. Better than okay." But Sarah wasn't sure. As she looked out her window and saw the first few motorcycles already arriving, as she heard the rumble of engines growing louder and louder, she felt fear creeping in. What had her simple act of kindness started? What was about to happen? By mid-morning, there were 100 bikes on her street. By noon, 300. They kept coming, an endless stream of motorcycles. Sarah's neighbors came out of their houses, standing on their porches, staring in disbelief. Some looked scared. Others looked amazed. The bikers were respectful. They parked in organized rows. They didn't rev their engines unnecessarily. But there were so many of them. Sarah's small street couldn't hold them all. They spilled onto neighboring streets. They filled the empty lot at the corner. They just kept coming. Marcus pressed his face against the window, his eyes huge. Mama, there's so many of them. Sarah could only nod, too overwhelmed to speak. What had she done? What was going to happen when the sun came up tomorrow morning and even more arrived? How could this possibly end well? That evening, as the sun set, there were over 1,000 motorcycles surrounding her neighborhood. The local news had arrived, their cameras filming everything. Police cars sat at both ends of the street, the officers looking both bewildered and concerned but keeping their distance because the bikers weren't causing any trouble. Sarah barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard more engines arriving, more voices outside. The rumble never stopped. It was like the whole world was descending on her little house. When dawn broke on that Sunday morning, Sarah got up and looked out her window. Her breath caught in her throat. During the night, hundreds more had arrived. Maybe close to 1,500 now, just like Robert had predicted. They were everywhere as far as she could see. Sarah pulled on her bathrobe and walked to her front door. Her hands were shaking. Marcus stood beside her, holding her hand tightly. She could feel his little body trembling. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, even though she wasn't sure it was. She opened the door and stepped out onto her small porch. The cold morning air bit at her face, but she barely felt it. All she could see were the bikers, hundreds and hundreds of them, standing in the street, on the sidewalks, in yards, all facing her house. The morning sun glinted off chrome and leather. The silence was deafening. No engines running now, no one talking, just 1,500 bikers, standing and watching her house. Sarah's heart pounded. This was it. This was the moment she'd been dreading. What did they want? Why were they all just standing there, staring? Then, slowly, like a wave, something began to happen. The bikers in the front row reached into their jackets. Sarah gasped, instinctively pulling Marcus behind her. Her mind raced with terrible possibilities. Had she made a horrible mistake? Had she let dangerous people into her home? Were these people here to hurt her? But what they pulled out wasn't weapons. They were envelopes. White envelopes, each one held in calloused hands. And then, as Sarah watched in stunned disbelief, the bikers began walking toward her house, one by one, slowly, deliberately. The first one, an older woman with gray braids and a leather vest covered in patches, climbed the steps to Sarah's porch. She looked Sarah right in the eyes, and Sarah saw tears streaming down the woman's weathered face. "Thank you," the woman whispered, pressing an envelope into Sarah's trembling hands. "Thank you for showing the world what kindness looks like." Before Sarah could respond, the woman stepped aside, and another biker took her place. A huge man with a thick black beard and arms covered in tattoos. He too had tears in his eyes. He handed Sarah an envelope. "My sister is a single mom like you," he said, his deep voice cracking. "I'm going to make sure I help her more. Because of you." Then another biker came, and another, and another. The line seemed endless. Each one handed Sarah an envelope. Each one said something to her, thanking her, blessing her, telling her stories about how her kindness had inspired them. Some were crying. Some were smiling. All of them looked at her like she was something precious. Sarah's hands filled with envelopes. She passed them to Marcus, who stood wide-eyed, taking them into the house. But they kept coming. More envelopes. More bikers. More tears and thanks and blessings. "What is this?" Sarah finally managed to ask one of them. "What's in these envelopes?" The biker, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, smiled. "We heard you work 2 jobs. We heard you gave us all your food. We heard you turned up your heat even though you can't afford the bill. Every rider here wanted to make sure you never have to worry about that again. We're taking care of you, Sarah, the way you took care of us." Sarah opened one of the envelopes with shaking hands. Inside was money. A lot of money. She opened another. More money. Her vision blurred with tears as she realized what was happening. These 1,500 bikers had each brought her money. To help her. To thank her. To make sure her kindness didn't leave her worse off than before. The envelopes kept coming. The line of bikers stretched for blocks. The morning sun rose higher in the sky, and still they came, one by one, to thank the single black mom who had opened her door to strangers in need. But as Sarah stood there, overwhelmed by this impossible generosity, something in the crowd shifted. There was a disturbance toward the back. Raised voices. Shouting. The orderly line of bikers broke apart as people turned to look. Sarah's relief and joy turned instantly back to fear as she saw men pushing through the crowd. And these men weren't bikers. They were dressed differently. They looked angry, and they were heading straight for her house, shoving their way through the bikers who tried to stop them. The angry men burst through the crowd of bikers like a storm tearing through clouds. There were 5 of them, dressed in suits and carrying clipboards and cameras. The lead man, tall and thin with slicked-back hair and a sharp nose, pushed past Robert and marched right up to Sarah's porch steps. His face was red with fury. "Are you Sarah Jenkins?" he demanded, not waiting for an answer. "I'm Howard Mitchell from the city zoning department, and this gathering is completely illegal. You have 1,500 people on a residential street without permits. You're violating at least a dozen city ordinances." Sarah's mouth went dry. She clutched the envelopes tighter against her chest. "I didn't ask them to come. They just showed up to thank me for helping some folks who were cold." "I don't care why they're here," Howard snapped. He held up his clipboard like a weapon. "This is a residential neighborhood. You can't have gatherings of this size without proper permits, insurance, security plans, and approval from the city council. The fines for this could be $50,000 or more." $50,000. The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. She felt Marcus grab onto her leg, frightened by the angry man's voice. All around them, the bikers had gone silent, watching this confrontation unfold. The joy and warmth of just moments ago had been replaced by cold tension. "Sir, please," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I'm just a single mother. I work 2 jobs. I can't pay $50,000. I just helped some people who needed it." "That's not my problem," Howard said coldly. He turned to the bikers, raising his voice. "All of you need to clear out immediately, or I'll have the police arrest every single one of you for unlawful assembly." Robert stepped forward, his weathered face hard as stone. "Now hold on just a minute. This woman is a hero. She opened her home to strangers. She gave everything she had. And you're going to punish her for that." "I'm enforcing the law," Howard said. "Something you bikers probably don't know much about." The crowd of bikers rumbled with anger at that insult. Sarah could feel the tension rising like heat from a fire. This could turn ugly fast. She had to do something. "Please," Sarah called out, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Please, everyone stay calm. Sir, Mr. Mitchell, I'll pay whatever fines I need to pay. Just please don't arrest anyone. These people didn't do anything wrong." Howard smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Smart woman. My colleagues here will document everything. You'll receive the citations in the mail. And all these motorcycles better be gone in 1 hour, or the fines double." He turned to leave, but then stopped and looked back at Sarah. "Oh, and we'll be inspecting your house too. I'm sure we'll find other violations. Overcrowding, fire code issues, who knows what else." As Howard and his colleagues walked away, pushing through the crowd of bikers, Sarah felt her legs go weak. She sat down hard on her porch steps, the envelopes spilling around her. Everything was ruined. Her one act of kindness was going to destroy her. She'd lose her house. She'd lose everything. Marcus sat down beside her and put his small arm around her shoulders. "It's okay, Mama. We'll be okay." But Sarah wasn't sure that was true. She put her face in her hands and tried not to cry in front of all these people. Then Linda, the red-haired biker woman from the first night, climbed up onto Sarah's porch and raised her voice. "Listen up, everyone. We've got a problem, but we've also got a solution. How many of you know a lawyer?" Hands went up all across the crowd. Dozens of hands. "How many of you know people in the media who can tell Sarah's story?" More hands. How many of you are willing to fight for this woman, the way she opened her home to us? Every single hand went up. All 1,500 bikers raised their hands, their faces set with determination. The rumble of their voices saying yes, and we're with you. Sarah rolled like thunder. Robert climbed up onto Sarah's porch next to Linda. Brothers and sisters, we didn't come here just to say thank you and leave. We came here because Sarah represents everything we believe in. Kindness, community, taking care of each other. And we don't let our own get pushed around by bullies with clipboards. The crowd roared their agreement. We need lawyers here now, Robert continued. We need people calling every news station in the state. We need to make so much noise that the city can't ignore us. Sarah Jenkins is not going to lose her home because she helped people. Not on our watch. Within minutes, the bikers had organized themselves like a military operation. Several who were lawyers started making phone calls, talking about permits and ordinances and legal defenses. Others were on their phones with news stations, telling Sarah's story. Still more were setting up a perimeter around Sarah's house, making sure no one else from the city came to bother her. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us motivated and reminds us that our stories are making a difference in people's lives. A biker who introduced herself as Patricia, an accountant from Grand Rapids, sat down with Sarah on the porch. Honey, we need to count what's in these envelopes. We need to know what we're working with. Sarah, Marcus, and Patricia started opening envelopes. Sarah's hands shook as she saw what was inside each one. $20, $50, $100. Some had checks. Some had cash. Every single envelope had money and a note. The note said things like, "Thank you for restoring my faith in people," and "You're an angel," and "For Marcus's college fund." They counted for an hour. When they finally finished, Patricia looked at Sarah with tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, there's over $300,000 here." Sarah stared at her, unable to process the number. "That can't be right." "It's right," Patricia said, laughing and crying at the same time. "These 1,500 riders, they brought you $300,000. Some brought $20 because that's all they had. Some brought 1,000 because they could afford it. But every single one of them brought something." Sarah looked out at the crowd of bikers, still standing in her street, still watching over her house. These strangers, these people she'd fed with hot dogs and pasta, had just changed her entire life. She could pay off her house. She could quit one of her jobs. She could send Marcus to college someday. She could breathe for the first time in years. But even as joy flooded through her, Sarah noticed something that made her stomach clench with new fear. At the edge of the crowd, she saw Howard Mitchell talking on his phone, his face twisted with rage. He was gesturing angrily at the bikers, at her house, at everything. And the way he was looking at her, with such hatred in his eyes, made Sarah's blood run cold. Whatever fight was coming, it wasn't over. It had just begun. And something told Sarah that Howard Mitchell wasn't going to give up easily. As the sun climbed higher in the sky and the bikers continued their vigil around her home, Sarah held Marcus close and wondered what new storm was brewing on the horizon. Howard Mitchell stood at the end of the street, his phone pressed so hard against his ear that his knuckles were white. Sarah couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see his mouth moving rapidly, his free hand jabbing the air with each angry word. After 5 minutes, he hung up, looked directly at Sarah's house with a cold smile, and walked to his car. Before he drove away, he rolled down his window and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "Enjoy your little party while it lasts. This isn't over. Not by a long shot." The threat hung in the air like smoke after a fire. The bikers shifted uneasily, but none of them left. If anything, more seemed to be arriving. Sarah watched as another 50 motorcycles rolled down the side streets, their riders coming to join the others in solidarity. Robert came up onto the porch where Sarah still sat with Marcus and Patricia. His face was serious. "Sarah, we need to talk about what just happened. That man Mitchell, he's not going to let this go. We have people making calls, trying to find out what he might do next." Before Sarah could respond, a sleek black news van pulled up as close as it could get to her house. A reporter, A young woman with perfect hair and a bright blue suit jumped out with a cameraman right behind her. She navigated through the crowd of bikers, who parted to let her through. "Ms. Jenkins? I'm Rachel Torres from Channel 7 News. Can we talk to you about what's happening here?" Sarah looked at Robert, who nodded encouragingly. "It might help to get your story out there," he said quietly. So Sarah found herself standing in front of a camera, Marcus holding her hand, telling the reporter about the cold night, the stranded bikers, and her decision to help them. She talked about growing up poor, about her mother's lessons on kindness, about working 2 jobs to give Marcus a good life. Her voice was soft and humble, and she kept saying she didn't do anything special. She just did what anyone should do. But Rachel Torres looked at her with something like awe. "Ms. Jenkins, in a world where people are afraid of their neighbors, where everyone locks their doors and minds their own business, you opened your home to 25 strangers. And now 1,500 bikers have come to honor you. How does that make you feel?" Sarah thought about it for a moment. "Overwhelmed," she said honestly, "and grateful, and scared too, because now the city says I'm in trouble for something I didn't even plan. I just wanted to help some people who were cold." The interview lasted 20 minutes. Rachel asked about the money, about Howard Mitchell's threats, about what Sarah planned to do next. When it was over, Rachel turned off her microphone and spoke to Sarah person to person. "Ms. Jenkins, I'm going to make sure this story runs on every newscast today. What that city official did, threatening you like that, it's not right. People need to know what's happening here." True to her word, by early afternoon, Sarah's story was everywhere. Played on the local news. It spread across social media. Soon, national news outlets were picking it up. The story of the single black mother who helped stranded bikers and then got threatened by the city for her kindness struck a chord with people across the country. Sarah's phone, which she'd had to turn off because it wouldn't stop ringing, had hundreds of messages when she finally checked it. Friends from work, people from Marcus's school, distant relatives she hadn't talked to in years. Everyone was reaching out. Some offered support. Some offered money. Some just wanted to say they'd seen her on the news and were proud of her. But not all the attention was positive. Around 3 in the afternoon, a group of protesters showed up at the end of the street. They carried signs that said things like, "No biker gangs in our neighborhood," and "Keep our streets safe." There were maybe 30 of them, led by a woman Sarah recognized from the neighborhood association meetings she'd never had time to attend. The woman's name was Carol Peterson, and she lived 4 blocks away in a bigger, nicer house than Sarah's. Carol had a megaphone, and she wasn't afraid to use it. "This is a residential area. We have children here. We don't want dangerous bikers taking over our streets. Sarah Jenkins may think she's a hero, but she's brought chaos to our community." The bikers watched the protesters but didn't engage with them. Robert had made it clear that everyone needed to stay calm and peaceful no matter what happened. "We're here to support Sarah, not to cause trouble," he'd told the crowd. "Let them say what they want. We know the truth." But Sarah felt sick watching the protesters. These were her neighbors, people who lived on the same streets she did, and they were angry at her. She'd never meant to cause problems. She'd just tried to help. Marcus tugged on her sleeve. "Mama, why are those people mad at you? You didn't do anything wrong." "I know, baby," Sarah said, pulling him close. "Sometimes people get scared of things they don't understand. They see all these bikers and they think it's dangerous, even though everyone here has been nothing but kind." Linda came to sit with Sarah on the porch steps. They watched the protesters shout their slogans while the bikers stood silent and dignified. "You know what I see?" Linda said. "I see people who never lifted a finger to help anyone, judging you for helping too much. That's what this really is." As the afternoon wore on, more news vans arrived. The protesters got louder, energized by the cameras. The bikers remained calm, but Sarah could feel the tension building like a storm about to break. This couldn't go on forever. Something had to give. Around 5 o'clock, just as the sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, 3 black SUVs pulled up. Men in suits got out, and Sarah's heart sank when she recognized the mayor of Detroit among them. Mayor James Bradford was a tall, distinguished-looking man in his 50s who'd been in office for 6 years. He walked through the crowd with his security team, heading straight for Sarah's house. Sarah stood up, her legs shaking. This was it. The mayor himself had come. This had to be bad news. Cities didn't send their mayors to residential streets unless something serious was happening. Mayor Bradford climbed up onto Sarah's porch and extended his hand. "Ms. Jenkins, I'm James Bradford. We need to talk." His face was unreadable, giving nothing away. Sarah shook his hand, noticing how cold and formal his grip was. He looked at the crowd of bikers, at the protesters, at the news cameras all pointed at them, and then back at Sarah. "Ms. Jenkins, what's happened here over the past 2 days has created quite a situation. We have code violations, safety concerns, neighborhood complaints, and now national media attention. I'm here to tell you personally that the city is taking this matter very seriously." Sarah felt her heart drop into her stomach. This was it. They were going to arrest her, fine her, take her house. Her one act of kindness was going to destroy everything she'd worked so hard to build for Marcus. However, Mayor Bradford continued, and Sarah heard a shift in his tone. "I'm also here because I watched your interview on the news. I heard your story, and I've spent the last 2 hours on the phone with my staff, with city council members, and with community leaders, discussing what we should do about Sarah Jenkins." He paused, and in that pause, Sarah heard Marcus whisper, "Please don't hurt my mama." Mayor Bradford looked down at Marcus, and something in his stern expression softened. He knelt down to the little boy's level. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus, sir." "Well, Marcus, your mama did something very brave. She helped people who needed help, even though she didn't have much to give. That's the kind of person we need more of in this city, not less." He stood back up and turned to face not just Sarah, but the cameras, the bikers, the protesters, everyone watching. When he spoke again, his voice carried across the street. "I came here today ready to deal with a code violation situation. But what I found instead was something I never expected." Mayor Bradford pulled a piece of paper from his jacket pocket and unfolded it slowly. Sarah watched his face, trying to read what was coming, but she couldn't tell if this was good news or bad news. The entire street had gone silent, everyone waiting to hear what the mayor of Detroit was about to say about the single mother who'd opened her home to strangers. And then Mayor Bradford began to read from the paper in his hands, and his first words made Sarah's blood run cold. Effective immediately, the city of Detroit is filing formal charges against Sarah Jenkins for multiple violations of city code. The crowd of bikers erupted in angry shouts. The protesters cheered. Sarah felt her legs go weak, and she would have fallen if Linda hadn't caught her arm. This was really happening. They were really going to destroy her life for trying to help people. But Mayor Bradford wasn't finished speaking, and what he said next would change everything once again. Mayor Bradford raised his hand, calling for silence. The angry shouts from the bikers faded to tense murmurs. The protesters stopped their cheering, confused by the mayor's gesture. Sarah stood frozen, Linda's hand still gripping her arm, waiting for the hammer to fall. "Let me finish," Mayor Bradford said firmly. He looked down at the paper again, then back up at the cameras. The city of Detroit is filing formal charges against Sarah Jenkins for multiple violations of city code. However, after reviewing the circumstances of this case with City Council in an emergency session this afternoon, we have unanimously decided that all charges will be immediately dropped and the case dismissed. The street exploded. The bikers roared with approval, their voices shaking the windows of nearby houses. Sarah's knees buckled and she sat down hard on her porch steps, unable to process what she'd just heard. Marcus jumped into her lap, hugging her tight. Even some of the news reporters were clapping. The protesters looked stunned and angry. Carol Peterson's face turned bright red, and she shouted into her megaphone, "This is outrageous. What about our safety? What about our property values?" Mayor Bradford turned to face the protesters, his expression hardening. "Mrs. Peterson, I understand your concerns about the size of this gathering, but let me be very clear about something. Sarah Jenkins did not organize this event. She did not ask for any of this. She simply helped 25 people who were freezing in the cold. What happened after that this outpouring of gratitude, is not her fault. It's a testament to how much her simple act of kindness meant to people. He turned back to Sarah, and his voice became gentler. Ms. Jenkins, the city of Detroit has a complicated history. We've had hard times, we've struggled, and sometimes we've lost sight of what makes a community strong. It's not fancy buildings or big businesses. It's people like you, who see someone in need and help them without thinking about what it might cost you. You gave everything you had to strangers. You didn't ask for recognition. You didn't ask for reward. You just did what your heart told you was right. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Thank you, sir. I was so scared. I know you were, Mayor Bradford said. He pulled out another paper from his jacket. But I have more news. The city of Detroit would like to honor you with the key to the city, an award we give to people who represent the very best of what our city can be. We'll have a proper ceremony next week at City Hall, if you'll accept. Sarah could barely speak. Yes, I'll accept. Thank you. There's one more thing, Mayor Bradford said, and now he was smiling. Mr. Mitchell, the zoning official who came here this morning and threatened you, has been suspended pending an investigation into his conduct. Several people have filed complaints about how he spoke to you and these citizens. That kind of behavior does not represent the values of our city government. Robert stepped forward from the crowd. Your Honor, if I may speak? Mayor Bradford nodded. Of course. My name is Robert Chin. I'm the president of the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club. We were the 25 bikers Ms. Jenkins helped 2 nights ago. On behalf of our club and all the riders here today, I want to thank you for doing the right thing. We were prepared to fight this in court for as long as it took. We were ready to make sure Sarah didn't suffer for her kindness. But you've shown integrity and wisdom, and we appreciate that. Mr. Chan, Mayor Bradford said, I've been doing some reading about your club, the charity work you do, the veterans you help, the fundraising for children's hospitals. You're good people, and what you've done here today, coming together to support Ms. Jenkins, that speaks volumes about your character. The mayor addressed the full crowd again. Now, I do need to ask for your cooperation. This many people on residential streets does create legitimate safety concerns. Not because of who you are, but simply because of the numbers. We need to make sure emergency vehicles can get through if needed. We need to make sure residents can access their homes. Can I count on you all to work with our police department to manage this situation responsibly? The bikers agreed immediately. Within minutes, they were reorganizing themselves, creating clear lanes for traffic and emergency vehicles. Some moved their motorcycles to different locations. Others volunteered to help direct traffic. They showed exactly the kind of responsibility and community spirit that Mayor Bradford had called for. The protesters, seeing they had lost this battle, began to disperse. Carol Peterson shot Sarah one last angry look before climbing into her expensive car and driving away. A few of the protesters stayed, but their signs stayed lowered, and they seemed more curious now than hostile. As the mayor prepared to leave, he stopped in front of Sarah one more time. Ms. Jenkins, you're going to have a lot of attention over the next few days. People are going to want to interview you, write stories about you, maybe even offer you opportunities. I hope you'll use that platform to keep spreading your message of kindness. God knows we need more of it in this world. I will, sir. I promise. After the mayor left, the energy on the street shifted. Felt like everyone could finally breathe again. The threat was over. Sarah wasn't going to lose her house. She wasn't going to be fined. She was going to be honored instead. Patricia, the accountant who'd helped count the money, came back up onto the porch. Sarah, we need to talk about this money. $300,000 is a lot of cash and checks to have sitting in your house. We need to get it into a bank account where it's safe. I don't even know what to do with that much money, Sarah admitted. I've never had more than a few $100s in my savings account at one time. Well, you're going to need a financial advisor, Patricia said, and a lawyer probably to set up some kind of trust for Marcus's education, and an accountant to help with taxes. This is going to change your life, Sarah. We need to make sure it changes it in good ways. Over the next few hours, the bikers helped Sarah figure out the practical details of her new situation. Several lawyers volunteered their services for free to help her set everything up properly. A financial advisor who was part of a motorcycle club from Ann Arbor offered to help her invest the money wisely. An accountant explained how gift taxes worked and what she'd need to report to the IRS. Sarah's head was spinning with all the information, but she was grateful for the help. These people, these bikers who she'd fed with hot dogs and pasta, were now making sure she was taken care of in every possible way. As evening approached, Marcus tugged on Robert's sleeve. The big man bent down to hear what the little boy wanted to whisper to him. "Mr. Robert, do you think I could sit on one of the motorcycles? Just to see what it's like?" Robert's weathered face broke into a huge grin. "Son, I think we can do better than that." He looked up at Sarah. "If it's okay with your mama, how would you like to go for a ride?" Sarah's first instinct was to say no. Motorcycles were dangerous. Marcus was too young. But then she looked at her son's hopeful face, and at Robert's kind eyes, and at all these people who'd shown her nothing but love and respect. She thought about her own fears and how they'd almost kept her from helping the bikers in the first place. She thought about how teaching Marcus to trust good people was just as important as teaching him to be careful. "Okay," she said, "but you go slow, and he wears a helmet." Marcus's shriek of joy made everyone laugh. Robert pulled a spare helmet from his bike and carefully fitted it onto Marcus's head. He lifted the little boy onto the motorcycle and climbed on in front of him, making sure Marcus's arms were wrapped tight around his waist. "Hold on, buddy," Robert said. "Let's take a little ride around the block." Sarah watched as Robert started his motorcycle, the engine rumbling to life with a deep, powerful sound. Slowly, carefully, he drove down the street with Marcus, going no faster than a person could walk. Marcus's face was pure joy, his eyes wide with excitement. His grin so big it looked like it might split his face in half. Other bikers started offering rides to neighborhood kids whose parents agreed. Soon there were a dozen children riding slowly around the block on motorcycles, all of them squealing with delight. Even some of the neighbors who'd looked suspicious earlier came out to watch, and Sarah could see their expressions softening as they saw how careful and gentle the bikers were with the children. As the sun set and the sky turned orange and purple, someone produced a guitar. Then someone else had a harmonica. Suddenly there was music in the air, and people were singing. It felt like a celebration, like a block party, like a community coming together in a way that didn't happen much anymore. Sarah stood in the middle of it all, holding a cup of coffee someone had brought her, watching Marcus ride around on Robert's motorcycle for the fourth time, seeing her neighbors laugh and talk with the bikers, listening to the music float through the cool evening air. 2 days ago, she'd been a tired single mother struggling to make ends meet. Now she was standing in the middle of something magical, something that proved kindness could multiply and spread like ripples in water. But as the celebration continued and the sky grew darker, Sarah noticed something that made her smile fade. A car was parked across the street, half hidden in the shadows between streetlights. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, watching everything. She couldn't see who it was, but something about the way the car sat there, still and silent like a predator watching prey, made her uneasy. She was about to point it out to Robert when suddenly the car's headlights flipped on, bright and blinding. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle lurched forward, accelerating rapidly. It was heading straight toward the crowd of bikers and children, and Sarah realized with horror that Marcus was directly in its path. Sarah's scream cut through the music and laughter like a knife. "Marcus!" Everything happened in slow motion and impossibly fast at the same time. The car's engine roared as it barreled toward the group of bikers and children in the middle of the street. Marcus was still on Robert's motorcycle, his small body frozen in fear as the headlights bore down on them. Robert reacted with the speed of someone who'd been riding motorcycles for 40 years. He twisted the throttle and the bike leaped forward, carrying him and Marcus out of the car's path by mere feet. The car swerved, its tires squealing, but instead of stopping, it kept coming, aiming now for a group of bikers who were scrambling to get out of the way. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us motivated and reminds us that our stories are making a difference in people's lives. 3 bikers dove to the left. 2 more rolled to the right. The car missed them by inches, so close that one man's jacket was clipped by the side mirror. But the driver wasn't done. The car skidded into a sharp turn, kicking up smoke from its tires, and came around for another pass. This time, the bikers were ready. A wall of leather-clad men and women formed a human barrier, protecting the children and Sarah behind them. The car accelerated again, and for one terrible moment, Sarah thought she was about to watch people die protecting her and her son. But the car swerved at the last second, missing the wall of bikers by a few feet. It screeched to a stop in the middle of the street, and the driver's door flew open. Out stepped Howard Mitchell, the zoning official from earlier that morning. His face was twisted with rage, his eyes wild and unfocused. In his hand, he held something that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. A gun. "You ruined my life," Howard screamed, waving the gun at the crowd. People scattered, running for cover. Parents grabbed their children and dove behind cars. The bikers, instead of running, moved forward, positioning themselves between Howard and the civilians. "I've worked for this city for 23 years. 23 years. And they suspended me because of you people. Because of her." He pointed the gun directly at Sarah, who stood frozen on her porch, unable to move or breathe. Everything her mother had taught her about kindness, everything she believed about helping people, had led to this moment. A man with a gun, pointing it at her, blaming her for his own mistakes. Robert had dismounted his motorcycle and handed Marcus to Linda, who immediately ran with the boy toward the back of Sarah's house. Now Robert stood at the front of the group of bikers, his hands raised in a calming gesture. "Howard, that's your name, right?" Robert's voice was steady and calm, like he was talking to a scared animal. "Howard, you don't want to do this. Put the gun down. Let's talk about this like reasonable people." "Reasonable?" Howard laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "There's nothing reasonable about any of this. That woman let a bunch of criminals into her house, and everyone treats her like a hero. I try to enforce the law, do my job, and I'm the villain. Where's the reason in that?" "We're not criminals," Robert said quietly. "We're teachers and nurses and mechanics. We're parents and grandparents. We pay our taxes and help our communities. We're just people, Howard. Just like you." "You're nothing like me." Howard's hand was shaking, the gun wavering as he pointed it at different people in the crowd. "You get to ride around on your motorcycles playing rebel, while people like me have to follow the rules. Work the boring jobs. Do what we're supposed to do. And for what? To get suspended? To have my face all over the news as the bad guy?" In the distance, Sarah could hear sirens. Someone had called the police. Help was coming, but would it arrive in time? "Howard," Sarah said, and her voice surprised her by not shaking. "This isn't about me or them. This is about you feeling like life hasn't been fair to you. I understand that. I felt that way too. When Marcus's father left, when I couldn't pay my bills, when I had to work 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. Life isn't fair, Howard. But that doesn't mean we hurt people." "You don't understand anything," Howard said, but his voice cracked. "You don't know what it's like to do everything right and still lose. I followed every rule. I was never late. I never called in sick. And they suspended me for doing my job. How is that fair?" "You didn't get suspended for doing your job," a new voice said. Mayor Bradford stepped out from behind one of the news vans, his hands also raised. He must have heard the commotion and come back. "You got suspended for threatening a citizen, for being cruel and vindictive when you should have been professional and compassionate. That's not doing your job, Howard. That's abusing your power." Howard turned the gun toward the mayor, and several bikers tensed, ready to rush him if he made a move. "You're the one who suspended me. You took everything from me." "No," Mayor Bradford said firmly. "You took it from yourself. Sarah Jenkins helped people who needed help. That's not a crime. That's what we should all do. You saw her kindness, and instead of being inspired by it, you looked for ways to punish her. That says something about you, Howard, not about her." The sirens were getting louder now. Police cars were probably just blocks away. Howard could hear them too, and his desperation was growing. His finger moved toward the trigger. "If I'm going down," Howard said, tears streaming down his face now, "then she's going down with me. This is all her fault. All of it." He steadied the gun, pointing it directly at Sarah's chest. Robert and 3 other bikers started moving toward him, but they were too far away. They'd never reach him in time. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of Marcus, praying that at least her son would be safe, that Linda had gotten him far enough away. But the gunshot never came. Instead, there was a different sound. A tackle. A grunt. Sarah opened her eyes to see Howard on the ground, the gun skittering across the pavement. On top of him was someone Sarah never expected to see coming to her rescue. Carol Peterson, the neighborhood association leader who'd been protesting against Sarah just hours ago, had tackled Howard Mitchell from behind. The older woman was much smaller than Howard, but she'd hit him with enough force to knock him down and dislodge the gun from his hand. "You will not hurt people in my neighborhood," Carol said, breathing hard as she pinned Howard's arms behind his back. "I may not have liked this circus, but nobody points a gun at a mother in front of her child. Not on my watch." Police cars screeched to a halt all around them. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, shouting commands. They quickly handcuffed Howard, who'd stopped fighting and was now just sobbing into the pavement. They carefully retrieved the gun and helped Carol to her feet, checking to make sure she wasn't hurt. Sarah ran to Carol and grabbed her hands. "Thank you. You saved my life. You saved all of us." Carol looked uncomfortable, her face flushed. "Well, I still think this gathering was too much for a residential street. But that man was insane. Someone had to do something." "You were very brave," Sarah said, and she meant it with all her heart. As the police led Howard Mitchell away, putting him into the back of a patrol car, the crowd began to breathe again. Parents emerged from hiding places with their children. The bikers lowered their defensive stances. Linda brought Marcus back from the rear of the house, and he ran to Sarah, who swept him up in her arms and held him so tight he squeaked. "Mama, I was so scared," Marcus whispered into her neck. "Me too, baby. Me too." Robert came over, his face pale but composed. "Sarah, I think maybe it's time for us to clear out. This has been too much. We never meant to bring danger to your door." "This wasn't your fault," Sarah said firmly. "That man was disturbed. He would have done something regardless. You all protected us. You formed a wall between him and the children. You were willing to take a bullet for strangers. Don't you dare feel guilty." But despite her words, Sarah could feel the mood had changed. The celebration was over. The magic of the evening had been shattered by violence and fear. As the police took statements from witnesses and the news cameras captured footage of the aftermath, the reality of the situation settled over everyone like a heavy blanket. One by one, the bikers began preparing to leave. They started their engines reluctantly, saying goodbye to Sarah and Marcus, promising to stay in touch. The crowd that had been 1,500 strong was beginning to thin out, heading back to their homes and normal lives. Sarah stood on her porch with Marcus, watching them go, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. It had been the most incredible 2 days of her life. Terrifying, yes, but also beautiful. She'd seen humanity at its best and its worst, often within the same hour. As the last of the daylight faded and streetlights flickered on, Sarah noticed that not all the bikers were leaving. About 50 of them remained, parking their motorcycles in organized rows, clearly planning to stay. Robert was among them. "Robert, you don't have to stay," Sarah said. "The danger is over. The police are here." Robert shook his head. "We started this by coming to your door that cold night. We're going to see it through. Some of us are staying until we know for sure that you and Marcus are safe. That's what family does, Sarah. And whether you like it or not, you're family now." Sarah felt fresh tears sting her eyes, but these were different tears than the ones she'd cried in fear just minutes ago. These were tears of gratitude, of belonging, of finally understanding that she wasn't alone in the world. But as she looked at the police cars still parked on her street, at the news crews still filming, at the broken glass where Howard's car had jumped the curb, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this story wasn't quite finished yet. Something else was coming. She could feel it in her bones, like a storm building on a distant horizon. And she was right. At that very moment, in a hospital across town, Howard Mitchell was being evaluated by doctors. What they would discover about his mental state and his connections would unravel a much bigger story than anyone expected. A story that would bring even more attention, more danger, and more difficult choices to Sarah's doorstep before this was all over. 3 days passed after Howard Mitchell's arrest, and Sarah's life had become something she never could have imagined. Her small house was still surrounded by a rotating group of about 30 bikers who'd appointed themselves her unofficial security team. News crews came and went, though less frequently now. Her phone never stopped ringing with interview requests, book deal offers, and invitations to speak at events across the country. But on Wednesday morning, Detective Lisa Rodriguez from the Detroit Police Department knocked on Sarah's door with news that changed everything again. "Ms. Jenkins, may I come in?" Detective Rodriguez was a serious woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "We need to talk about Howard Mitchell." Sarah invited her in and made coffee while Marcus played with toy motorcycles that the bikers had given him. Robert, who'd barely left Sarah's side since the incident, sat at the kitchen table with them. "What we discovered about Mr. Mitchell is concerning," Detective Rodriguez began. "When we searched his home and examined his computer, we found that he'd been planning this for days. He'd been monitoring social media, tracking the growth of the biker gathering, and becoming increasingly obsessed with you, Ms. Jenkins." Sarah's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "Obsessed. He blamed you for ruining his career, but it goes deeper than that. Howard Mitchell has been with the city for 23 years, like he said. But what he didn't say is that he's been written up 14 times for excessive enforcement, harassment of citizens, and abuse of power. He's made a lot of people's lives miserable over the years. Your situation was just the final straw that got him suspended. The city had been building a case against him for months. So this really wasn't about Sarah at all," Robert said quietly. "Not really. She became a symbol to him of everything he thought was wrong with the world. People breaking rules and being celebrated for it, while he enforced rules and was vilified. His psychiatrist says he had a breakdown, years of resentment and mental health issues coming to a head all at once." Sarah felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. "Is he going to be okay?" Detective Rodriguez looked at her with surprise. "You're asking if the man who pointed a gun at you is going to be okay?" "He's sick," Sarah said simply. "He needs help, not just punishment." The detective smiled slightly. "You really are as kind as they say. Yes, he's being held in a psychiatric facility for evaluation. He'll face charges, but his lawyers are arguing for mental health treatment rather than prison. That's partly why I'm here. The prosecutor wants to know if you'd be willing to write a victim impact statement supporting treatment over incarceration." "Of course I will," Sarah said without hesitation. "What he did was wrong and scary, but destroying his life won't make mine any better. If he can get help and become healthy again, that's what should happen." After Detective Rodriguez left, Robert looked at Sarah with something like awe. "You're going to help the man who tried to kill you?" "My mama always said that hurt people," Sarah explained. "Howard Mitchell was hurting long before I ever met him. Maybe if he gets the help he needs, he won't hurt anyone else. Isn't that what mercy looks like?" The news of Sarah's decision to support Howard's treatment spread quickly, adding another layer to her growing story. Some people called her a saint. Others said she was naive. But to Sarah, it wasn't complicated. It was just the right thing to do. That afternoon, Mayor Bradford called Sarah personally. "Ms. Jenkins, I wanted to let you know that the key to the city ceremony is scheduled for this Saturday at City Hall. But I also wanted to ask you something. The city has been receiving donations in your name. People from all over the country sending money for you, inspired by your story. It's over $1 million now." Sarah nearly dropped the phone. $1 million? That can't be real. "It's very real, and legally it's yours. People designated it for you specifically. But I'm calling because we've also received requests from people asking if some of that money could be used to help other single mothers in Detroit who are struggling like you were. I wanted to ask what you think about that." Sarah didn't even have to think about it. Yes, absolutely yes. I have more than enough with what the bikers gave me. Use that $1 million to help other mothers. Set up a fund or a program or whatever makes sense. There are so many women working 2 and 3 jobs just to survive. If this money can help them, then that's what it should do. Mayor Bradford was quiet for a moment. Ms. Jenkins, you continue to amaze me. We'll set up the Sarah Jenkins Foundation for single mothers. It will provide emergency assistance, job training, childcare support, and educational scholarships. And we'll announce it at the ceremony on Saturday. When Saturday arrived, Sarah put on the nicest dress she owned, a simple blue one she usually wore to church. Linda and several of the biker women had offered to take her shopping for something fancier, but Sarah refused. I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not, she'd said. I'm a working mother who got lucky. That's who I am. City Hall was packed with people. All the bikers who'd stayed came, wearing their leather and patches proudly. News crews from across the country were there. Mayor Bradford stood at a podium with Sarah beside him, Marcus holding her hand. Today we honor Sarah Jenkins not just for one act of kindness, but for teaching us all what it means to live with an open heart, the mayor said to the crowd. She helped strangers without hesitation. She forgave someone who threatened her life. And now she's giving away a fortune to help others instead of keeping it for herself. If this isn't what heroism looks like, I don't know what is. He presented Sarah with a golden key on a blue ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause that seemed to shake the building. Cameras flashed. People cheered. And Sarah, holding that key in one hand and Marcus's small fingers in the other, felt overwhelmed by the weight of it all. When it was her turn to speak, Sarah stepped up to the microphone. She looked out at all those faces, at the bikers who'd become her family, at the neighbors who'd doubted her, at the strangers who'd been moved by her story. I didn't do anything special, she began, her voice soft but clear. I just saw people who needed help and I helped them. That's what we're all supposed to do. That's what makes us human. My mama used to say that kindness doesn't cost money. It costs heart. And every single person in this room has a heart. Every one of you can do what I did. You can see someone struggling and offer a hand. You can forgive someone who hurt you. You can share what you have, even when you don't have much. She paused, looking down at Marcus, who was watching her with pride shining in his eyes. The bikers who came to my door that cold night taught me something important. They taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them. It's about who protects you, who believes in you, who stands with you when things get hard. And these past few days, I've gained the biggest family I could ever imagine. Sarah held up the golden key. This is beautiful and I'm honored to receive it. But the real key isn't made of gold. The real key is kindness. It opens every door. It breaks down every wall. It turns strangers into friends and friends into family. And every single one of you already has that key. You just have to be brave enough to use it. The applause was deafening. People were crying, laughing, hugging each other. Robert stood in the front row with tears streaming down his weathered face. Linda was openly sobbing. Even some of the reporters had to wipe their eyes. After the ceremony, as people lined up to congratulate Sarah and take pictures with her, a young woman approached. She was black, about Sarah's age, with tired eyes and hands that looked like they'd worked hard labor. She held a little girl, maybe 4 years old, on her hip. Ms. Jenkins, the woman said quietly, I'm Denise. I'm a single mother too. I work at a factory and I clean offices at night. I heard your story and I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for showing people like me that we matter. That what we do every day, working ourselves to the bone for our kids, that it matters. Sarah hugged Denise tightly, careful not to squish the little girl between them. It matters more than anything, Sarah whispered. You're a hero, Denise. Every single day, you're a hero. As the sun set that evening and Sarah finally headed home with Marcus, exhausted but happy, she reflected on everything that had happened. 1 week ago, she'd been an invisible woman, struggling to survive, unknown and unnoticed. Now she was famous, financially secure, and surrounded by more love than she'd ever known. But the most amazing thing, Sarah realized, was that she hadn't changed at all. She was still the same person who'd opened her door to cold strangers. The world around her had changed, yes, but her heart remained exactly the same. Robert and a small group of bikers escorted Sarah and Marcus home, their motorcycles rumbling through the Detroit streets like protective thunder. When they reached her house, Sarah saw that someone had painted a mural on the fence. It showed a small house with an open door, light spilling out into the darkness, and the words, "Kindness lives here." Marcus pointed at it excitedly. "Mama, look, they made art about you." "Not about me, baby," Sarah said, unlocking her front door and welcoming everyone inside for coffee and conversation. "About all of us. About what happens when people choose love over fear, when they choose community over isolation, when they choose kindness over cruelty." That night, after everyone had gone home and Marcus was asleep in his bed, Sarah sat on her front porch in the quiet darkness. She thought about her mother, who'd passed away 5 years earlier, and wished she could see what her lessons about kindness had grown into. She thought about all the single mothers out there who would be helped by the foundation. She thought about Howard Mitchell, hoping he would find healing. She thought about the 25 bikers who'd been cold and stranded, and how that one moment had rippled out to touch thousands of lives. A motorcycle rumbled up to her house, and Robert climbed off, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the diner where Sarah used to work nights. "Thought you might still be awake," he said, handing her a cup and sitting down beside her on the steps. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping coffee and watching the occasional car pass by. "What are you going to do now?" Robert finally asked. "You've got money, you've got fame, you've got opportunities. You could do anything." Sarah smiled. "I'm going to keep being Marcus's mama. I'm going to quit one of my jobs so I can spend more time with him. I'm going to help other single mothers through the foundation. And I'm going to keep my door open to anyone who needs help. That's what I'm going to do." "That's it?" Robert asked. "You could travel, you could write a book, you could be on TV. "Maybe someday," Sarah said. "But right now, I just want to live a good, simple life." Isn't that what all this was really about? Living a life that matters. Not because it's famous or fancy, but because it's kind. Robert nodded slowly. "You're wiser than most people I know." They finished their coffee as the night deepened around them. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew. A dog barked. The city breathed and lived and moved forward, as cities do. Sarah Jenkins, the single black mother who took in 25 cold bikers and changed a city, went inside and locked her door. But in her heart, that door would always be open. Because kindness, her mama had taught her, doesn't cost money. Costs heart. And Sarah's heart was big enough to welcome the whole world. Thank you for watching. If you found this story engaging, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective adds value to the conversation. To stay updated with future stories exploring themes of race, inequality, and the unexpected choices that shape lives, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful and thought-provoking content.